this time and nothing else. We have too many things on our plate right now to deal with, and we want to make sure that this part of the project gets done first. So with that, we welcome you all. Thank you for all being here. And I will hand it over to Michael and Jen and to John Lemieux and to the rest of those who will do their presentation. So Michael, all yours.
All right, thanks, Joe. And I too would like to welcome everybody who is on the Zoom call or watching on the Around the Clock Facebook page and who may be watching this in the future. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I thought I was going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. And I will go through this, and I would just ask that we, if we can, we hold off on questions until the end, only because it's really hard for me to navigate both the screen and get questions. But if you can just take note, if we get to a slide where you might have a question, hold it till the end. We can go back and revisit it and maybe even revisit that slide if you would like. As Joe mentioned at the very beginning, we are privileged to have some very, very good professionals working with us, including John Lemieux from the Vertex Company. They are what's known as our owner's project manager. They represent our interests throughout this project, and it's a position that is required under Mass General Law for a project of this size. We also have had a great architectural team and engineering team, HKT Architects. The two principals that we've been working with, Janet Slaminda and Amy Dunlap, have actually been affiliated with this project since 2018. So they're very familiar with the site and the project. Joe did go through all of the members of the Public Safety Building Committee. I won't run through them all again. Just know that it's a good mixture of professional staff, including our two chiefs, select board members as our chief elected body here, and then also community members. And so that was done intentionally to get a variety of different viewpoints and different perspectives as we have gone through this process. And as Joe mentioned, this has actually been a very long process. We've talked about this for 20 years, actually longer than that, more like 30 years. It really became something that became from the back burner over towards the front burner starting in 2002. Chief Melnick at that time had written a memo to the select board and the town manager and had noted a number of deficiencies in the police building and also alluded to some of the deficiencies in the fire department in terms of physical infrastructure, suggested that the town start looking at a new facility. That really kind of laid fallow until 2008, when the town commissioned the Matrix organization to do a study on the needs assessment and a location study for a new fire and police station. That study came to the conclusion that we needed to have a joint public safety building of a certain size. It said the location would be most beneficial around the area of East Union Street, where it splits from 135 and the East Union Street goes up to the high school. In 2014, town manager Schiavi at the time reassembled a public safety building committee. They spent a couple of years looking at different sites and different public safety buildings to get an eye in a view into what is actually happening in terms of design and construction nowadays. And then really we started putting our foot on the gas, if you could say, in 2018. At that point in time, we commissioned HKT to do a land feasibility study, looked at a couple of different locations, or they narrowed things down to a couple of locations. One, the Fafford property at 14 to 16 East Union Street. The other one being a property off the MBTA access road, which the town now owns. After a good amount of analysis, the architects and engineers, they came to the conclusion that the best site was the East Union Street site. It was a harder site to work, but it also offered the best operational capabilities. So in 2018, at that time, also the select board signed a gift agreement with the owner of that property, 1416 Union Street, which was Howard Fafford, to gift us 3.82 acres. And later on in 2018, November specifically, we had a vote and an appropriation for the design and engineering funding, which was $3.5 million to move forward with this project. Town meeting also at that time voted to accept the gift property from Fafford. And through 2019 and 2020, we've spent that time selecting an OPM, again, an architect, and went through the process of designing and engineering of the building. And that leads us up to now, here in January of 2021, where just in a week and a half, we will have a special town meeting for these projects, and then also a special town election the following Wednesday. A lot of people have talked about over the years why this building is such a necessity for a variety of different reasons. Here's two of the three properties. These are the Main Street properties. The other one is on Cedar Street. That's the fire station on Cedar Street. The police station property was built in the late 70s. The fire station was built in 1928, I believe. It was the 20s. And it really, if you've had an opportunity to go through the facilities, you really don't need an explanation as to why we need a new facility. It really has nothing to do with maintenance. It really has nothing to do with the way we've taken care of them. It really has everything to do with the fact that they're old. They were designed for a time when police and fire operations were limited in scope. We had a limited population, or a much smaller population at the time. And it's just not a modern facility. I think everybody goes to some of the really, I think, incredible things that they can't believe, such as the fact that we don't have, for our police officers, a locker room for our females. They actually have to go and change, do their business in a trailer outside of the police station. It just doesn't have enough space for the things that we need to do and to do them effectively. And actually, Chief Alfano had a really good story about what happened recently after a very high-profile traffic stop. Chief, do you want to elaborate a little bit as to that scenario that we talked about earlier with the prisoners?
Sure. Last week, there was a car chase in Framingham, and our officers ended up stopping the car on Homer Ave. The car was loaded with drugs. There were two drug dealers in the car, bags and bags of drugs, scales, $2,000 in cash, a really stereotypical drug dealer bust. And we brought the suspects to the station, and we needed to interrogate them and question them independently. And we couldn't do that because we don't have any type of a prisoner interrogation area or a questioning room. So they had to question one prisoner sitting on a hard wooden bench in the booking area, and they tried to isolate the other prisoner so that they wouldn't hear what each other was saying. And when they were put back in cells, and we actually put one prisoner in, who's a male, we had to put him in the female cell block because it was separate. And the officers came into my office. They were so perplexed. They said, the prisoners are speaking to each other right through the cell walls. They could have clear conversation. The cell walls were so thin and back to back. And then in addition to that, we brought the car that was seized into our Sallyport garage area because we needed to have the state police crime unit come down and fingerprint it and catalog the evidence. And there was so much marijuana in the car that you couldn't breathe. The stench was incredible. And our station for 2 days was almost unlivable because of the stench of marijuana. We actually had to contact our facilities department for the town to come out with deodorizing chemicals to try to get the smell out. Officers couldn't work in their offices. The smell was so bad. So just awful working conditions. And the officers were pleading with me saying, how can we work in these conditions? But yet they're out there doing police work, what they should be doing, good police work.
Yeah, I think that's just the most recent example of how inadequate our facilities are. I'm glad Chief Gun Friday is here. If people care to look at some of the WACA archives, they'll see a great video of Chief Gun Friday. I think back in the 80s, walking through the building and showing some of the things that we were very proud of at that point in time, and then also highlighting a few of the deficiencies. Chief Gun Friday hasn't aged a bit since then, so glad to see that. But it's really, really kind of striking when you see that video and you see some of the videos from more recent times about things. As you know, our first responders and public safety has evolved over the years, we've also found out about more issues that are affecting our first responders, namely cancer, especially for our firefighters. Chief Roby, would you like to elaborate a little bit on the cancer concerns that we now have, or that the fire service has, and how we can't really address them right now?
Sure. So today's fire stations are built with what they call clean areas, dirty areas. And basically that's after we do our job, after we go to a fire, we come back with our fire gear on it. We've been exposed to smoke, a lot of toxic gases, and we bring them back to the station. We're hanging them up right next to the fire truck. You can see a little bit in the picture that you have showing now. The gear is hanging right beside the truck. So as we walk through the station, we're always exposed to it. In today's facilities, that gear should be hanging in a separate room. So when you take it off, there's a fan in there. There's negative pressure blowing it and venting it to the outside. So it's never exposing the firefighters. The perfect example of that is today is COVID. I think a lot more people relate to that. We don't have a place. When we come back to the fire station, we don't have that room to go undress, put on new uniform, unless we go through the fire station up to the locker room, which is after you've walked completely to the fire station. So basically, we've brought COVID through the whole fire station before we've actually cleaned up and got ready for the next call. So they both really work hand in hand, one being on the fire side, one more on the medical side. We're allowing firefighters to be exposed to day-to-day stuff that we shouldn't be. You know, there's a way to clarify it, and it really needs to be done.
Thanks, Chief. Again, we can list all the items where things are deficient, and we can certainly provide some stories like this. I think a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there's plenty of evidence out there that just shows how inadequate our facilities are. Also, this new station is going to address some community concerns. So there has been some talk about the lack of community space for our residents to do certain things. This would actually provide community space for our residents, so they would be able to use it if we weren't using it for public safety purposes. The other thing that's really noticeable is this provides a direct way for us to go over the tracks quickly. Whereas right now at the fire station, especially the Main Street one, we have it's right there at the tracks. If there's a train going through, it delays our response. The new station is located right near the Fountain Street Bridge, so it gives us access over that. So we'll move on. So when we were going through the design of the building, we wanted to address all of those needs that we talked about before. But another critical factor for us was making this building sustainable and really moving us towards the goal of being net zero in 2040, which is it's a very aggressive goal. So we incorporated a number of sustainability features. The main one being, really we went with a geothermal HVAC system. I know that there are schools that have geothermal. I do know that there are some municipal buildings like libraries that have geothermal. To my knowledge, this would be the very first public safety building that has a geothermal system, at least in Massachusetts. We've also created it to be a solar-ready building. So we didn't think we had enough money to go ahead and actually install solar panels, but we thought, you know what, why don't we take the opportunity while we're constructing this to do things like run the conduit, make sure that we have reinforced ceilings that can handle the weight of panels. So do that to make it solar ready. And we also included a number of other things like electric vehicle charging stations, enhanced insulation, in low flow fixtures. The sustainability committee was really really a key part of the selection of that geothermal system. They recently met and wanted to, they put out a resolution commending us for our commitment and the fact that this building does help achieve that and moves us towards that goal. So taking all of those things into account, we went through the design process. This is what the public safety building will look like. It's a 3-story building at on the right side if you're looking at it. It's set back quite a ways from the street, I believe about 100 feet. So, you know, the elevation is not necessarily going to be as intimidating as it might be if it's right on the street. Of course, the left side is dedicated towards apparatus bays. The first floor plan, that is where if you're part of the public, you're going to do your main interaction. So you do that. We have some administrative areas and then also police operational areas on the first floor. And then really the one whole wing of the building is taken up with apparatus bays, which is very important. One of the things I didn't mention when we were talking about need is the fact that we have to store some of our fire equipment at different locations. And in some cases, we have to store it outside. So storing it outside obviously leads to some maintenance issues. But also if we need specialized equipment, sometimes we have to go from one station to another to pick up the right equipment before we actually respond to the emergency. So this would help us house all the equipment in one place. The second floor is really dedicated to like some of the more supportive areas, so like locker rooms for the police department. There's the fire living quarters there, and then the rest of it is really dedicated to you know, some operational aspects and then also some of the mechanical systems. The third floor is where you'll see most of the administrative offices for both the police and fire department. And that's generally what that is dedicated for. So this is a really key point I want to hammer home. We wanted to make this building as cost efficient as possible. We hear everybody saying we don't need to build the Taj Mahal. We certainly agree with them. At the same time, you can't do something that's penny wise and pound foolish. We're starting to see the results of that in some of the things that were done 10, 15, 20 years ago where, you know, it made sense at the time, maybe from budgetary concerns to do something at less cost, but then we end up just paying more for it later. And so we tried to take that balance in mind when we started reducing what we call the programming of the building. We reduced bunks. So in the future, as our fire department grows, we might need to double up in a dorm room or two. We reconfigured some of the open spaces like the lobby and the emergency operations center. We consolidated areas like the kitchen and fitness rooms. We eliminated a jail cell. And again, I mentioned previously when we talked about sustainability, the fact that while it doesn't have solar panels on it, it is going to be solar ready. So I just want to get across the fact that this has been on our mind. You know, how do we make this building right? Not just for 2021, but for 2051 and beyond. So ultimately that gets to, you know, how much is this thing going to cost? I think that's pretty much the prevalent question on everybody's mind. I will say when our last estimate, which was our construction document estimate, which was completed, I believe in October or November, we looked at the construction cost price in that estimate was around $29 million. And that certainly seemed to be in line with everything that we were seeing. But we had been told, and through other municipalities and through the professional circles that John and Vertex run in, that COVID had really put a damper on municipal work for a variety of different reasons. And because of that, contractors weren't getting much work. And so they were actually very, very hungry and were bidding very aggressively to get what few municipal projects there were out there. So we were encouraged to continue to move forward with this project, even in the midst of a pandemic, just because it could lead to great savings. We did get bids in. I believe we got 6 bids in between Christmas and New Year's. All 6 of them came before or were below that $29 million construction cost. The lowest actually came down to $22,445,000. So about $7 million less than what we anticipated, which as we go through the next slides, I'll show you that equates to a lot less cost for the town and also taxpayers. So ultimately, what is this project going to cost for us? Well, when you look at the $22.4 million in construction costs, you look at the technology, communications, and furnishings, you look at the design fees, OPM fees, other administrative costs, and a very, very healthy contingency at $2.8 million. That is a larger contingency than you will see in a lot of projects. You get to a total of $30.9 million for the total building. Again, before, when we had that $29 million estimate, we were looking at around a $36.5 million building. Again, we got the lower construction costs. We did beef up the contingency a bit, and so that evened out to 30.9. We have already appropriated, like I mentioned in 2018, $3.5 million for those design and OPM fees. So what we will be asking for at town meeting is an appropriation of $27,400,000. And just to get an idea of where this ranks in terms of other public safety projects, in terms of some of these efficiency measures like cost per square foot. Again, the COVID situation in a very ironic, it is very ironic, the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic and yet this is the best time to bid a project. Again, we got the bid came in $7 million less. That equated to a cost per square foot of $529. And this is a comparison of different public safety projects that our project manager has worked on over the last couple of years. You'll see at the far left, the Southborough Public Safety Building, which John could tell you is the anomaly of all anomalies in terms of bids. It's like the bid of a lifetime. Came in at $458, but our project is actually just next at $529. And we actually have more expensive site work that needs to happen. And we're also including some more expensive things to meet our sustainability goals. So in terms of value, I really do think that this project is a good value proposition for the town of Ashland as well. So what that means is, what that total project budget of $30.9 million equates to when you look at servicing a bond over 30 years at a very conservative interest rate. It comes out to $1.3 million, specifically $1,379,000. So normally in Ashland, every single building construction project that we have done has been funded entirely through a debt exclusion, or it has, we've used CPA funds to contribute to that, community preservation funds. We don't have that option here. But what we did decide to do is actually lessen the tax burden for residents by redirecting some of our existing funding towards this project, or shifting some of the costs onto revolving funds. Again, this wasn't done in a haphazard way. This was done in a very thoughtful process, but we realized that we have 2 projects coming forward at once. Both are incredibly important for the town moving forward, and we were really hoping to alleviate some of the burden. $250,000 of that $1.3 million is going to come from our capital budget, our current capital budget. And then $500,000 is going to come from reductions in current departments, or we would shift things to revolving funds in order to help pay for this. And so once you subtract what we're already spending in redirecting that towards the project, it reduces the required debt exclusion amount to $629,000 or $683, and that's annually. So it's actually a little bit less than half of the total annual project cost. And so what that means for you, the average homeowner, is that originally when we were looking at this, we were looking at a cost to the average homeowner of about $158. With the revision in interest rates and the revision in the cost, that brings down the cost to the average homeowner down to $90. Now, when I say the average homeowner, I'm using the average assessed value, which is $400,000 here. So if your assessed value is more, it's going to be more than $90. If your assessed value is less than $400,000, it's obviously going to be less. A few other financial considerations that I think are really, really important is we're going to save $30,000 annually for the rent that we pay at 91 Main Street for administrative offices. By consolidating buildings, we're going to have less maintenance costs. So you have one system that you're maintaining. You're going to have a more energy efficient building, leading to utility savings. A really important thing that flies under the radar is that we're actually going to be able to conduct training in-house, including our firearms qualifications. Whereas currently, we actually have to pay people to go do that training, and then we have to cover an overtime shift to backfill that person's shift while they are at training. Now we're able to we would be able to hold this training in-house. In addition to that, we actually have the ability to host training as well. And so other communities would pay us to utilize our facilities. And then another thing is that we have really been looking forward to getting accredited for our police department. We will never achieve accreditation with the current facilities. It's just impossible. We can't have the separation of duties. We don't have the space. It will never happen. With the new building, we have the opportunity to be accredited, and that leads to certain funding opportunities as well. Another concern that has been brought up is, well, we don't maintain our facilities. If you don't want to vote for the project, you're going to find, different rationale to not vote for the project. Facilities, though, is really, I think, a false one, or the fact that we don't maintain them. When myself and the previous town manager got here, I was here as the finance director. We were coming out of the financial recession, and we weren't investing a lot in maintenance and in facilities. We've really tried to restructure the finances in order to free up some money to do that. And I think you can see this is just the facilities related items in the capital budget, what we call our pay-as-you-go capital item. And so you can see that we've made some extensive investment. We even included the schools in FY15. We started to include them, which had never been done before. And then this also doesn't include things that or facilities maintenance that we have done through grant projects and through debt for some of the larger projects that we've done. So for example, a few years ago, we were able to secure $300,000 to replace boilers in some of our buildings, secure $300,000 through a green community grant. So we are making investments in the facilities, and we're also making investments in our personnel. Again, certainly not a dramatic increase except for FY21. What we have been doing is sharing a facilities director with the school department. When our last director left in 2018, Jim and I discussed, Superintendent Adams and I discussed the fact that the model really wasn't working for either of us. So we're creating our own facilities department, individual facilities department. And so we hope to see expanded service that way. And then the thing that, one of the things I get really excited about is the possibility of what can we do with the current Main Street properties. Cedar Street's another thing altogether, but Main Street properties are downtown properties. These are in such critical locations in Ashland that they have the ability to be transformative for the town, especially with some of the things that are happening downtown. The downtown project, the mill building is now, the owner is looking at a redevelopment project there. The two stations, the fire station and the police station, they just have a wealth of opportunities. One of the things I've heard consistently is that the police station should just be knocked down, and you could either build something there or use it for parking. HKT did an analysis of that, and it would create 50 spots. But then you look at a more historic building like the fire station, and you look at different models around the Commonwealth and actually across the nation, and it can be exciting to see what can happen. We just have a couple of examples here. If you've ever been to Norwood's Old Colonial Cafe, it's a great little restaurant. It's great atmosphere. They pay the town $90,000 annually, and they have an increase, an adder in there for every year. And it's been going on for over 20 years. And just down the street in Framingham, we have Amazing Things Art Center. I hope many of you have had the opportunity to go there and witness a show or see something. That was the Hollis Street Firehouse, and Framingham, the town of Framingham at the time, now the city of Framingham, and Amazing Things have worked out an agreement where it's mutually beneficial for both the city and the community. So what does this mean in terms of next steps? In January, obviously, we're going to have the votes. Pending passage of both of those, it requires a successful 2/3 vote at town meeting and a successful majority vote at the election to move forward. We'll spend February finalizing the contract documents with the lowest bidder. And then starting in the spring, we'll begin the site work, construction, and hopefully by summer 2022, we'll be finalizing construction, doing what's known as the commissioning, and then moving in. So I thank you all very much. And obviously, if you have any questions, looking forward to answering them. I think Chief Gunfrati, are you trying to speak? No.
No, I was just trying to maneuver the pictures around.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I've been known to do that too. So.
But I do have a question though.
Sure.
One of them is, if you were to put the solar in now with your low bids, much lower than you anticipated, could you afford to put the solar in now and increase your savings?
Potentially. John, you could probably speak a little bit to this, but I would say we would want to get more towards the end of the project and know what we had in terms of contingency left over before we made that decision. But John, why don't you?
Yeah, no, can you hear me okay? I've been having some mic issues. Okay, thanks. No, it's a good question because, there are certainly opportunities when it comes to solar, whether you want to own it yourself or you want to lease it, lease the space to have somebody else do it. So by, putting the infrastructure in the building to make it solar ready is great. But to Michael's point, we are building on a site that is a big rock. We know about that. The contractors know about that. But, we've got to make sure we get this building up and out of the ground first. And that's why we've got a little bit of a healthier contingency for just in case. But I think it's definitely something that the committee could look at, once you see the foundation coming out of the ground, and that's kind of the first big milestone. That means we've gotten out of the, one of the parts of the job that we knew was going to be a little difficult with this site.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions?
Mike, I got one comment, if I can.
Okay.
And that is, back in 1988, I put a $20,000 request before town meeting to do a feasibility study on the police station, and it was only 10 years old then. And what had happened, we had severely underestimated the growth of the town that happened in the mid-'80s. And I knew then, as did several other people, when I had the architect come through, and he said, we couldn't expand that building at all because of the way it was constructed. So just as a point of information.
That's a real important point, Chief. Really important. A couple of ways. I mean, there's just the fact that, you know, you realized even that early after it was built that it was inadequate. But I think what's really important there is the fact that you had architects all the way back then saying that we couldn't expand on the existing site.
Correct. Okay.
Any other questions? Mark, I see you.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
I I like two things so far in the presentation. You know, I came on late. I like how you set up the tax ways of using the revolving funds, which makes it somewhat easier, I say, probably for the a property homeowner, because of $90. It may sound like not much for what the project is, but it's still some money out of pocket of a one income, of still not much of an income per family, but $90 isn't too bad. That's one. Two, the a future thing is when downtown, when tearing down to the two buildings and replacing, saying the police would have a room for a 50 space parking lot, and the fire stations can be used for something else. I do like one of the options you got in there is the mixed use workspace, which, as I was probably think that the town manager and some elected people and all that, they know that I'm economically sort of idea wise to get business and money into the town to expand and help unbalance the 97-98% residential and the other. But I like those two things, the tax thing about $90 using a revolving instead of what you did that I had a couple of meetings ago with the you weren't too sure of property value from each of the houses first. Now it's revolving, and the new tearing down the buildings and putting some maybe mixed use workspaces, stuff like that. And the very last thing is it's a sore spot, but I got to ask, but I haven't been on the last couple of times, and the last time I saw I was on with the select board was when you were having a in progress with Fafford's property. Is that still a sore spot?
I believe that's going to be the next topic we're going to talk about, Mark.
So let me just address the land issue. So as I mentioned in the presentation, in 2018, we had an agreement with Fafford to donate 3.82 acres to the town for a public safety building. And again, that was accepted at town meeting. There were a couple of conditions in there that we needed to meet in terms of due diligence before it effectuated that transfer. And one that was somewhat open-ended was that we need, Fafford reserved the right to have an easement running through the property so he could access the back of the property that was still going to be his land and which could be developable. It was a reasonable request, but it had to be mutually agreed upon. And so really over the last couple of years, among other things, we have been trying to agree on where an easement could be located. We had suggested a couple of different locations. Mr. Fafford had suggested an easement location that ran right basically through the center of the property, which basically invalidates the purpose of the gift. We obviously can't build a public safety building there. But again, we've offered a couple of different alternatives. One was on the far east side of the property. It was going to be an expensive easement if people wanted to build there. We actually offered to even do the permitting as part of our project to make that more agreeable to Mr. Fafford. The other one actually had it going through our parking lot. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we haven't been able to agree upon an easement location. And we can talk about with maybe some motivations or if there were some strategies behind that on one of the parties' thoughts. We could all speculate, but at the end of the day, that's what it was. And so we essentially ran out of time and we needed to actually have the property. So we went ahead, presented it to town meeting to take it by eminent domain. Town meeting voted overwhelmingly to do that. And then the select board voted to take just the gift property for no compensation because it was a gift. And so that is going through the process at the Registry of Deeds right now.
Okay, so the last two small things, and then I'll take myself off. Have you finalized, one, the wetland situation, and two, final traffic studies? Are those two finalized and in the books and all set up?
Yes, so we did receive our order of conditions late in 2020. So that is good. And then traffic studies, there is going to have to be some traffic work and some traffic signalization work that happens. And that came through some of the traffic analysis that we did. But that's been included in the cost, correct, John? John is saying yes.
Sorry about that, muted, correct.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Hopefully that answers everything. Any other questions?
Michael, I would just like to do a quick editorial comment with respect to Mr. DeSoni's comments about the land acquisitions. It's not like this committee hasn't sat down and tried. I've sat down with Jen and yourself, with the Faffords, between 10 to 15 times over the last 2 years to sit down and try to work out some sort of agreement and arrangement. Needless to say, some of the things that we thought we had agreed upon and were assured would happen hadn't. And so that's why it's taken all this time to get where we are right now. My father told me one thing a long time ago: get it in writing or it's no good at all. So, but I'm a man that, if we have a verbal agreement, a gentleman's agreement, understanding, that's the way it should go. But it didn't, and we'll leave it at that.
I think Joe's talking about, at some point during this last couple of years. I do want to point out that we did have a signed gift agreement. That original gift agreement was signed, so it was on paper. All right, I am going to take a page out of Paul Kendall's book for the Mendez Committee. Typically at the end, he will unmute everyone to give them an opportunity to speak if they've been having some technical difficulties. Jen, I am not technically the host, so I don't believe I can do that. Would you mind briefly unmuting folks?
I think I just did, and then hold on one second. It's weird. It's saying participants are muted, but everybody else is muted. So if anyone is having difficulty, if they want to put their hand up, I can actually unmute anybody individually, but.
Well, since I spoke, I'll mute myself voluntarily.
Oh, God. Turtle. Not turtle.
So Michael, I'll just make a real quick comment. This is Steve Mitchell from the Select Board and from the Building Committee. And, first of all, Mark, thank you for those questions. I think they were right on, and I appreciate that. And I just wanted to, my observation and my discussions throughout this whole process really has been that most residents, if not all, recognize the need for these buildings. That's really not the issue. The issue really comes down to, the financing of it, the cost of it, and that's it's we can't minimize that, particularly in the conditions, the COVID-19 conditions that we exist in today. and it's unfortunate, we're trying to make, the fact is that we've got this great opportunity for this building at a time that is, less than desirable, let's say, and we're trying to make, in essence, lemonade out of lemons here. But the reality is that we need these buildings. We're the beneficiary of a gift property, regardless of the process that it took to actually acquire the property. It was a gift, and we're the beneficiaries of great pricing at this point in time. So the Massachusetts Department of Local Services has a great section where they provide a tax impact calculator, and based on the amount of money that Michael presented for a yearly debt payment of, I think, Michael, $694,000 is what it essentially is. It's literally 22 cents per thousand valuation. So if you have a house that is $400,000, if that's our average single-family house, it's $88 a year. So it's literally 22 cents per $1,000. So I just wanted to amplify a little bit on that component.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to reiterate some of the things and kind of combine some of the things that Steve and Joe and Mark have said. $90 is, yes, it's an incredible value. You're getting a brand new building. You're getting the opportunities to do something with the other buildings for under $100 a year. But that, I don't want to take away the fact that for some people that is a lot. And we understand that that's, people, when they go to vote, they're going to have to make a choice, and they're going to have to, weigh the impact to their pocketbook versus what they would get from their community for this. So they certainly don't want to let the value of the project override the fact that for some people, it doesn't matter how great a value it is, it's still expensive.
A couple of forums ago, I kind of brought that up. Now I think I'll come around the other side to get a full understanding instead of going one way. I'll come back around this way to see how this side does work on that. And that 22 cents, can that be brought up every time you come up with this forum, that you can put the tax brackets up and how much it is per to that graphic, that scale?
I think, yes, I think I can, Mark. I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah, because that would help tremendously to follow each time that a person understands what's going on, what's their bill assessed for. It's going to be, they can see a in progress stat going on. You want me to shut up? I'll shut up. Okay, no problem.
Mark, no, I just want to give other people an opportunity to ask questions, but yeah, I don't see any other questions. Matt, did you have a question?
I did have a question. I just had a comment. I'm sorry I joined a little bit late, but I just wanted to mention the Sustainability Committee met on Monday, and we kind of reviewed the two building projects, and we discussed the history of this project, and there really just wanted to acknowledge there's been some good collaboration. The Public Safety Building Committee has been really receptive to our feedback in terms of the building systems, and the design that you've settled on is one that will help us with our net zero goal, the long-term goal for the town. So we're gratified that it has a geothermal heating system. It's not primarily fossil fuel based, and I think that was a bit of a stretch for this project. Initially, we weren't going in that direction, and then we gave some feedback, and then you shifted. So we appreciate that, and we're definitely supportive of this project and feel that it supports, it's in line with the goals of the town in terms of net zero. So.
Thanks, Matt. And we certainly appreciate the Sustainability Committee's support.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Thank the committee as well.
So again, I want to thank everybody that's on the Zoom call and then everybody who's watching. Hopefully you found this informative. We'll be doing another one of these next Thursday, but in between then, if you have any comments or if you have any questions, please email us. The email address is psbcommittee, all one word, at ashlandmass.com. And if you don't know, again, the votes are January 23rd for town meeting, January 27th for the election. I will say that everybody on the building committee is supportive of the Mendez School as well. We think both projects are tremendously important, again, for the town. And we look forward to seeing you at town meeting, and also hope to see you at the polls. So on behalf of the whole committee and everybody here, I want to wish you all a good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thanks for participating.
Thank you.